Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
All right. Namaskara. Welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Sowmya Prabhakar, and along with me, I have Dr. Y Nithiyanandam, who heads our geospatial research program at Takshashila. And today, we aren't just going to vent about the heat that we're already facing, the literal weather heat that I'm talking about, but we're also going to look at this through the lens of Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, how the society, markets, and government are going to figure this out. And welcome to this All Things Policy episode,
Thank you,
Nitya.
Sowmya, for having me today.
Okay. Why I'm more so concerned is for the luxury of being in Bangalore. I think, at least for me, having an AC at home meant, a big no-no, at least in the growing up phase. But I think over a period of time, summers have been, dramatically different, and it's getting hotter day by day. And the summer has set in early is what we all feel. So I don't know if it's something that we could fix through a design or a policy related intervention. So because of that curiosity is when I said, okay, we should do an episode, and I feel you'll have some good answers for this.
Yes, and I wish, first of all, that you should avoid using AC as much as possible, of being in Bangalore. But honestly speaking, the days are over. It looks like most part of India would be facing tough summer this year and so on.
Yeah. Okay. So while we boast about this garden city and all of that, since we operate out of Bengaluru, I've seen that the landscape has generally shifted, right? You see, buildings earlier, which probably used to be of other material. Today, we see a lot of glass buildings, right? Mostly tech companies, or even I think a lot of people for aesthetics at some point started using it. And in a tropical country, or rather location like this, how much does it really kind of impact in terms of climate change, and is it just a bad urban design that we have adopted from elsewhere, or is it something that we don't understand enough
So let
yet?
me put this in two categories at large. One is climate change, other one is the local human induced impact. So let's say the climate change is a cumulative of all things happening around. And then, it's not necessarily people living in Bangalore would have contributed directly or indirectly, but then climate change is a global phenomenon. But there is another part called, the anthropogenic activity that we all do within cities, right? That is something where we take more toll by doing more and more human induced activities. Let me divide the anthropogenic activities into three categories. That is building emission, vehicular emission, and then human emissions. These are the three large contributing factors to this anthropogenic emission. Anthropogenic emission is nothing but when you get a quantity of sunlight, on a particular area, it is expected in nature that the same amount of heat dissipate back into the atmosphere, but it not necessarily at the same time. It takes few hours, it takes 10 hours, it takes 2 hours, it takes 3 hours, depending upon the surface. But then overall
Okay.
energy balance, if you look at it, it would be 100% incoming and 100% outgoing. That is an ideal thing. But Earth is like a black box, right? Here you get 100% and then you emit 120% or 130%. The 30% excess heat is basically called anthropogenic heat. It's called waste heat. So how it comes? By consuming electricity, and we run a lot of home appliances and HVAC systems, which dissipates heat. And again, fossil fuels, which after combustion it emits heat. And human beings naturally emits heat. We all know we do emit heat to a particular extent, but it is not a significant percentage compared to other two things which I've mentioned. So the
Mhm.
building design, the architectures of it, the material used in this, all will come under the building emission. I categorize into that. And the vehicular emission, again, depends on the type of vehicle people are using and its density, it again contributes. There's one more factor which is largely associated with building, but It's also contributing a lot is the impervious surfaces. Impervious surfaces means any surface which is hard and which is made of concrete and which is not allowing water to percolate and so it's called impervious surfaces. So hard surfaces. Basically, these surfaces again, create a lot of heat, puts back into the atmosphere. Now, city like Bangalore, we know that what is happening, the water bodies and vegetative surfaces, which are natural, things which minimize the heat, are reducing year by year. Whereas the factors which are contributing to the heat, like buildings, concrete surfaces, number of roads, and vehicles on road, all these are increasing, which eventually puts more heat into your environment. So that is why you are seeing, perhaps if you look at, let's assume everywhere in Bangalore or in any city, if the electricity consumption and all the parameters I have said, or let's assume if it is constant, then every part of Bangalore will have same temperature, unless there is local microclimatic condition based on topography exists. If you have a
Yeah,
same
yeah.
flat terrain in a city, you are expected to have a same thing. But then we are having multiple microclimatic conditions within the city. One of a contributing factor is the heat pockets within the city. That comes from this anthropogenic heat.
Oh,
So we as a community contributing to our neighborhood, and eventually it's more like a cycle, right? People, when you use air condition, you literally pulls out the heat from your room into an outside temperature. And today you can see even that air conditioner things are coming out by sensing external temperature and then altering internal temperature. So those kind of sensors are also coming up. So eventually you're
hmm.
putting it back and it goes to the environment and it impacts your neighborhood. So whosoever has the cooling system inside the house has a better chance and better comfort to live.
Right. Just extending to this part of the conversation, Nitya. So, if we look at how this affects, say, what I wanted to frame it as is, are there technical ways to kind of look at through satellites where this density of temperature is emitting a lot of emission, either through the architectural challenges, the topography, or even the emissions? Is there a way where technology allows to track this and fix it?
Yes. So there are a couple of things involved in it. We call it as urban heat intensity. That is basically the heat which is emitted from the surfaces. So I was fortunate to work on this for a couple of cities across, in Europe and in a couple of places around Hong Kong. So where we could able to map things from satellite and also validate it from ground observations, because the important aspect is everything, inferred from satellites are not correct. You require ground validation. But what satellite can actually give you is, let me give you this example. If somebody wants to understand temperature, surface temperature of different places in Bangalore, there are a couple of ways in which they can do. One is like you take an handheld device, which means you carry a thermometer which can measure surface temperature, and you can move around the city, right? But the time you finishes and the time you starts, it could be 5 o'clock, and then the time you ends, it would be 10 o'clock in the other side of the city. And all the surfaces naturally gets warm because when you have sunlight, at that particular time.
Yeah.
So this is not feasible if you just take an handheld device and go around the city. So then the other option is one can establish fixed weather monitoring stations across the city, but that is costly, right? And you can't do that. And in fact, it's not affordable as well. So the third option is a remote sensing technique. This is like when a satellite passes through a particular moment at a given instant, you could able to map even Bangalore and its outskirts at a particular time.
Mhm.
So at a particular time, we can able to measure the surface temperature of entire Bangalore and its outskirts. So that helps us to, understand which part of a city is warmer, which part of a city is cooler. That is one aspect. And a different sensor can also help you to understand the quantity and quality of vegetative surfaces within the study area. In that way, if you
Oh,
corroborate the geospatial analysis, like what we do, help us to overlay things, and we can actually see what are the contributing factors. If a particular area is quite warm compared to other
mm,
areas, we need to see what are the factors behind it. Like, is it more of dense built environment over there, or is there a lack of vegetative surfaces, or there is no water body around that area? These are like
mm,
it
mm.
helps the policymakers to take very quick decision. Having said this, this is not a job to, to be executed right only at the desktop. This requires a bit of field verification also.
Hmm.
The values in remote sensing can come out, even anybody can do it these days with the help of cloud computing, but then only classical analyst knows the multiple steps involved in it. Multiple things need to be looked at in the process. So if you know the study area and if you know how remote sensing physics works,
Hmm.
then it is easy for anybody to take a solid decision about a place.
Hmm.
That is an important thing to keep in mind. Yes,
Hmm.
remote sensing help us to do it. It helps us to do it instantly, and it helps us to do it continuously on a particular area. You can see every week how it behaves in the same area, or every year you can do it.
Hmm.
And this is an exercise to be carried out, continuously, because perhaps policymakers can work on minimizing temperature of a particular area, but one has to come back and see how effective the measures taken, right? If the measures taken
Hmm.
is not effective, then there's no point in repeating that exercise across the city. So that's how remote sensing plays a crucial role, but yes, it has to be used with a bit of caution and expertise.
Okay. So, like you mentioned, right? One is the green cover, maybe even the water bodies. But are we missing anything else in ensuring that we need to watch out for?
Yeah.
Because these seem to be very obvious, but
See,
anything
there's
else?
I'll tell you first what we are missing out, and then I'll tell you, even we are aware that vegetative surfaces and water body plays a crucial role. We're not using it effectively. I'll tell you two things here. First is the vegetative surfaces and water body, right? Everybody knows, vegetative surfaces and water body can brings down the heat in that area. But how do you, increase a vegetative cover when you have restrictions, right? If you see outskirts, the bigger trees are taken down for road expansion and things like that. And then people are planting small trees in compensation to that. If you look at number of trees or number of plants, maybe it is still balanced. But if you look at the size of it, in terms of its contribution, it's still not equitable, right? That is one. Second, if I start planting, or if whatever land you have, probably if you're living in an apartment, how do you manage the situation? Maybe bringing a couple of plants to your house, or making your roofs
Hmm.
or the walls green.
Hmm.
That is one option that you can do, right? These are all utilizing vegetative surfaces and the water resources.
Oh.
People use even the recycled water to sprinkle on roads, sprinkle on water bodies, so that
Hmm.
it brings down the temperature on that area. We have seen incidents where people used to spray recycled water closer to this what do you call observation stations, which eventually tells like the temperature is reduced to few degrees Celsius. But then this is a juhad, people carries
Yeah.
out, right? But to do it at a large scale, we need to look at heat pockets. One big mistake, city managers generally carries out is people looks at,
Hmm.
yes, urban heat as an indicator for it. Yes, the heat values which indicates every pocket. Yes, it is good indicator. But what we need to do beyond that is to go and identify the root cause for that particular zone.
Hmm.
Like it is not similar for entire Bangalore. It is not same for entire Jayanagar in Bangalore. It would be more microclimatic conditions that plays different things. Then accordingly
Hmm.
find a solution. It is not one size that fits everywhere. We need to look at it as a complex model here, because urban system is a complex one, right? It is not a straightforward one. So people also, if you look at heat action plan, couple of cities has heat action plans,
Hmm. Hmm.
but the heat action plan still is, focusing on increasing green cover and things, and then changing to cool roof. There is a physics behind that. Cool roof is more of making your roofs and walls.
Hmm.
I would say probably paint all these buildings as white as possible so that it reflects the heat rather than trapping into your walls. That eventually
Hmm.
minimize heat passing through your building, right?
Yeah.
But how feasible it is given an urban city like urban area like Bangalore, it's very difficult to implement, right? And it requires really an effort. Like once it happened in Tamil Nadu, where people are asked to create stormwater drainage. Like nobody knows what is stormwater drain, but everybody was asked to do it. Every house were asked to do it. So then people established stormwater drains. So similar activity is required to do something with this heat also, to minimize it, because the impact of heat is not properly envisaged. When I say this, the number of impacts in terms of death, bacterial and viral infections association to it is not measurable
Hmm.
in real terms. Because
Okay.
most of the time it is when people feel impact due to heat and they go to doctor, and the mechanism to account it as a heat related impact is quite long. So therefore, it is easily recognized as bacterial and viral infection.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So then it is definitely an invisible threat that exists, and that needs to be addressed carefully.
No, absolutely true. I think even recently I heard a case where actually the person was in the heat for the longest time, but was probably kind of thinking the food that one ate had caused the issue, because sometimes the symptoms also could be a little confusing,
Yeah.
right? But then, like you said, who's even tracking the heat
No,
strokes or the deaths that
interesting
happen?
point to consider, Soumya. There's if you look at the number of deaths, which is recorded as a heat-related deaths, most of them were died on road, and then during postmortem, it is identified as heat-related death.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, it is considered as death due to other causes, but heat could be one of a factor. So unless it is a death on road and then postmortem reveals, it's very difficult to see cases which are
Hmm.
impacted due to heat.
Interesting. Okay. So if we had to look at, say, the predictability of this, right? Do we have a way where geospatial data can anticipate heat waves and before they even hit us? Is there like early warning models that we are already using, like the way we would want to predict a tsunami or an
Right.
earthquake? Is there something like that?
Yes, there are two ways it can be done. One is like, let's leave out the complex models. Let's take only temperature as an indicator, and cities can even create an alarming system indicating their own people, and talking to the local media folks to disseminate the information, saying like the temperature is on the rising trend and it is predicted this part of the country will be in a higher trend. So let's be cautious and let's look into it by looking it as a proactive thing. But if you ask me how precisely we can able to do it, yes, we can do it, able to do it for at least near term, not like 6 months or 1 year ahead. At least couple of months we can able to predict, because the land and ocean has connections. So
Hmm.
by looking at the developments happening on ocean, one can able to predict how it is going to be on the subsequent period on the land as well. So there are complex model exists which takes care of this ocean surface indicators, it takes care of global parameters, climate parameters, and also takes care of city surfaces,
Hmm.
and then calculates how it would be impactful on the city. You don't necessarily need to study this at a scale at rooftop level or at a colony level. This still can be studied at a city level, or part of cities can be studied in this way. But definitely, yes, there are ways, and I think it is worth to invest as a policymakers. Can also, it can be done by people at research communities also. So it can be a project given to a couple of people to look into it to see how it's going to be, which part of Karnataka is going to be much
Hmm.
severe this year
Hmm.
and so on, and how severe it could be given the global climate trends and so on.
Okay, fair enough. So, if so, there are a couple of interesting alterations that people have started looking at, like you said, cooling down because the roofs are, done with retrofitting
Right.
buildings with, say, traditional material, right, and breathable material kind of thing. Are these scalable, or how are these in terms of people really adopting it? Is it like a expensive option for people to consider, or is it something that you think feasibility wise
Yeah, I
works?
think all this, if you look at people using older time materials and so on, I think that comes with a cost, right? One is like we are not able to find those kind of materials, and that comes with a cost automatically.
Hmm.
But people who were able to design there, it happens at house levels, right?
Yeah,
It's not happening much at apartment or high rises level. So
right.
there's a necessity to, scale it up. Probably government can think of how it can be scaled out to other places.
Hmm.
You don't have to force people to, let's say, paint it in a color that can minimize temperature, but then you can at least recommend it so that people can consider it, right? If anybody wants to do it, or
Hmm.
probably incentives for doing that may be considered so that people may consider doing these things.
Hmm.
But beyond that, also there are ways in which we can minimize the emission. For say, one significant effort people tried is like government suggested to keep your temperature at air conditioner set at 24 degrees Celsius,
Mm,
right? Because if you just get into most of the shops, where if the people are not aware of this, definitely what they do is they try to keep at 16 or 18, right, at the beginning itself,
mm,
which eventually brings too much of cool air into your room, but it consumes excess of energy and it creates stress on your machine as well. So nobody cares about stress on the machine. Perhaps nobody cares about electricity, but again, it is not required at all. So 24 is temperatures which were recommended to set. But then
mm, mm.
my argument is that again a very difficult thing to accept by every set of people,
Yeah.
because 24 is, let's say, if you're a new AC with latest technology, perhaps it works well. But then if you're using older AC, then people will go back to the 18 or 19 or 20, right, to make use of it.
Mm,
And the second part is,
yeah.
perhaps it may work for Bangalore, it will not work for Delhi.
Mm,
And then because your outside ambient temperature is different, and accordingly that has to be modified. So
mm,
are we in a position to recommend this state wise or region wise?
mm,
By looking at it spatially,
mm.
and geospatial tools can definitely help people to do this, but it is not done in the way as I'm telling, but probably it is done in the way to keep 24
Yeah.
across the thing. That is one reason why it is not enforced, also why it is not successful across the places also.
Yeah, and it's quite sad to see. I mean, at least while most people are in the comfort zones of home, while it's really hot, say right now while we are recording this, it's quite hot. And, a lot of these delivery folks from the gig economy are out there
Right.
on their scooters and all of that. And it kinds of worries me sometimes that, with their deadlines of 10-minute delivery and all those, promises, are we like negotiating too much? Our supply chains
True.
maybe need to rethink
No,
something here,
the
right?
important point in this is, as I told, vehicles are also contributing, right?
Yeah.
Imagine you are on a road, in a road junction, and then the
Hmm.
vehicles are not turned off, right? They are all still emitting, and it is turned on. And at times, the
Yeah.
signals
Yeah.
are also taking a little more time,
Hmm.
to get green.
Hmm.
At that situation, the gig workers or anybody else who is traveling on, a two wheeler, are exposed to it,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
then the temperature in these junctions are literally 1 or 2 degrees higher than its neighborhood. So eventually, you're taking
Hmm.
more heat and direct emission from the vehicles also. And as you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
there need to be a mechanism to look at the heat stress. Perhaps that need to be monitored. Otherwise, it goes unnoticed. And as you said, yes, definitely they require attention, but as a country level also, we have very limited suggestions to do during the heat period, right? Let's say
Hmm.
keeping yourself hydrated, keeping yourself, restrict yourself staying in shades. But some of these are not applicable, and some of these are not an operational solution for gig workers or anybody else who wanted to engage in outdoor activities or businesses outside the house.
Yeah.
So for them,
Hmm.
definitely we need to look at the ways, perhaps the companies who are engaging, or
Hmm.
the organizations who are interested in, should get into new ways to minimize the impact. Like I remember, the traffic police gets a special attention at certain cities to combat hot summer. Perhaps the people who are deployed on road should also get some measures to
Yeah.
mitigate it.
Yeah. So let's take a look at like if there's a policy toolkit of sorts to manage this or mitigate this better, Nitya. So a lot of states have this heat action
Right.
plans, right? HAPs is what's it called. So is this something that's practical and something that we can implement, or where are we on it?
A couple of cities. There are some I could name. There's one success model, and there is one not a failure model, not a quite successful model, I can say. But the
Mm,
successful model people say is Ahmedabad heat action plan, right? But it is largely successful in my understanding because of cool roof and multiple other
oh,
activities. But then if you want to use the same technique from Ahmedabad heat action plan into, for let's say for
Mm,
Chennai, it won't work,
mm,
right? Because as I told, it's not about deploying few of these techniques, and you need to look at it with respect to the ground scenario also. There
mm,
needs to be a different plan, and it is not something to be devised by sitting in a room. That's basically people needs to put the three-dimensional data and do extreme computation to understand how the ventilation works within a city. For say, when we did it in Hong Kong, there is always a good example which I used to share it with people. You know, Hong Kong roads at the time when Britishers designed, those were literally having good airflow from the ocean, and then it takes into the city and dissipates heat. And since Hong Kong
mm.
commercial areas are utilizing air condition to a very high level, you can see it is you feel quite cool when you walk on the street. But then if you go on the sides of the exhaust, it literally throws out extreme heat. But there's one city when we are doing a observation, we realize there is zero wind speed in the city. It's just because there's one big hotel which were blocking the entire flow to that street.
Oh,
It's a very big hotel.
oh.
So literally
Okay.
the streets are left with zero wind speed, which means the vehicle which is going on, those are going on the road, and the building heat which is emitted on the road, and the people who are living on the road, whosoever is dissipating heat, the heat get trapped, right? For a while
Oh,
at
oh.
least. So there is no
Mm,
natural way to take away the heat from that area. So these are the common challenges we will face because we are facing it, slowly. So one thing, climate change, yes, how far we can able to control it. There's a plan to get net zero emissions, but those
yeah.
are all long term things, right? How we can minimize things within a city. If a city management people, let's say, people in Bangalore, the management or the policymakers want to do something, then you need to look at in this way. You need to have three-dimensional data sets, look at the wind flow, look at the heat, generating sources, look at the mitigating factors, put all on spatial layers and see where you need solution, where you
Mm,
need immediate action, and where you can take some good examples and deploy it in other places. Because it's not just growing tree, right? In fact, a student of mine who completed his PhD just now, she's looked at the spacing of plants. Like it's not every species that you can put it everywhere you want. It is more like
yeah.
how you
Yeah.
space it, what kind of species should be suitable for mitigating. All those things need to be looked
Yeah.
at. So it's better to
Yeah.
look at comprehensively rather than taking some fancy solutions and deploying it in different parts of the country. It may not work as we are. It's not a simple thing as we discuss.
Yeah, yeah. Even on the conservation side, right? If you look at the natural habitat, I think the zoning is what people have been talking about a lot to fix things by, zoning so that you kind of pay attention to every aspect of the place. Like if you were to say advise a municipal body, Nitya, what is that zoning or a building code you would want to kind of change that will ensure that this baking of the city, like you mentioned the Hong Kong
Yeah.
instance, right? It's quite a thing that somebody noticed, and maybe technology allows you to kind of track this and see that a building was causing this, and then you probably can take corrective action. But we need to scientifically
Right.
approach this, right? So would you have something to offer in that sense?
Yeah. So, one way it is ensured in the building plan approval itself, right? People says you need to have this much space between two
Yeah,
buildings. It
yeah.
is to ensure that the minimum flow is ensured in these areas. But it's not a bad idea to do the wind flow modeling of a city to understand where are the challenges exist. Depends on the topography, development in an area, and so on. But what I would suggest to simply start with is to look at the areas which are vulnerable given the density of building. Let's say if you talk about a number of people living in an area, the impact would be different if the number of people lives in an high rise, right? Because high rises in India are not very close. You're not seeing your neighbor, right? Through the high rise most of the
Hmm.
time. Whereas if you are living in a dense urban area, old concrete, zone where your houses are densely packed with concrete roofings, there the impact is higher.
Mm,
I'm saying something which is contrary because people believe people lives in high rises have a better, higher impact due to heat stress. Because here the high rises are literally standing as a tall, unique pillar, and it is not taking much of
yeah.
toll. The toll is actually on the low rise, high dense, old concrete buildings where the ventilation is very less and the concretes are also
Mm,
contributing back. So look at these areas and change your mitigation strategies accordingly. Identify the old areas and then see. In fact, people who are living without the HVAC systems, right?
mm,
Bangaloreans may think it is not an immediate issue for people living in Bangalore because we still enjoy big, good weather in the evenings. But then look at
yeah.
daytime people living in informal settlements or old, um, clumsy urban settlements where they
Mm,
need
mm,
attention, and that also need to be looked at. And in Delhi, you can see the shelters for winter. But as
mm,
you said, gig workers also required an attention. It's not a bad idea in cities where the heat are extreme. They need to create shelters for summer as well. And Chennai has created an example by creating the air conditioned room for gig workers to take rest. But that was started with some scale. I don't know whether it has scaled up the entire
oh,
city, but there
okay.
were some facilities for them to take rest for a while.
Yeah, because you see them always huddle in some corner,
Yeah,
right? Of course, they're taking like a small chai shop, or just taking that 2 minutes to talk to somebody. But it's also if you look at our public infrastructure, be it bus stops or any place like this, right? A lot of times people are even standing there and trying to make sure heat is still around,
yeah,
right? There's no way that design allows for somebody to kind of come and just sit while the bus comes or any other public transport they're waiting for. So it's an irony that we've not been able to fix these things, because a bus stop is to ensure that your waiting is
yeah.
comfortable, right? Like you're kind of having some space to sit, some shelter. Although there's a roof of sorts, it doesn't really optimize for a summer like this.
So I feel
Yeah.
if we presume that our future summers would be, much pleasant, I don't think that it is better to think at this stage rather than leaving out to harsh summer in subsequent years. It's not a bad idea for a city like Bangalore also need to think about this because as we are witnessing pretty high temperature being recorded outside, so it is necessary to step into this issue as well.
Yeah, no, proactively, I think talking about these things are useful, from as much as we say about AQI and everything, right? These things matter, although it's very seasonal. That's why we see it at a particular, season, and then we forget about working on it.
But
But
since you rightly remembered AQI here, there is a compound effect when you have air quality which is poor, plus when you have more heat. The particles
hmm,
tend to store heat and then it traps heat also. So
hmm,
when your air quality is poor, right now the southern states are having excellent air quality and you're not feeling much of it. But then when air quality becomes poor for one or other reason, at that time when you have heat, there will be a compound impact as well. So that's again a
hmm,
point to look at, possibly how intense an impact would be at a particular place.
hmm, hmm. Yeah, and also, for all of us to be able to think about it throughout, right? It just gets to us when there is heat around us. I think people lose their cool. Generally, the ability to work calmly is gone, and then the fatigue also sets in, right? And to be fair, yes, as human beings, our threshold for heat in the other parts of the year maybe is slightly moderated by just the fact that you can't really manage extreme heat. And of course there are things people have which will ensure that they can take care of themselves, but it's important for us to look at it more from a scientific
Yeah.
perspective, and uh, see how we can
There's one term which I wanted to recall here that's actually defines many things. That's called thermal comfort. There is a
Mhm.
standard for having thermal comfort within a room. There is a standard to have a particular thermal comfort when you're walking. So if you are encouraging people to use, pedestrians, footpath, if a thermal comfort is not right, if you're not able to get an appropriate thermal comfort, people will not use it. The same thing applies to people lives within a building, and whether it is a school, whether it is a working place, anywhere, if thermal comfort is not right, then people who are not able to focus and work on it, right? So thermal comfort is a term which we largely missed out. Perhaps heat action plans, whosoever is doing, can also include a component called thermal comfort, studying it from various point of view, various places, how it needs to be ensured in schools in order to get a right mental ability with kids to learn, and
Mm.
how it happens in workplaces. All those things can be, comes as a policy decision, as a recommendation for various set of people to use.
Yeah, but is there also a cyclic aspect to it? Like some summers are intense, and then you
Right.
have a slightly better off in an alternate
Yeah, yeah.
year. Anything
Yeah,
like that?
it's
Yeah.
a set of equation where there are multiple factors which impacts the thermal comfort. And it changes to individuals also. But largely we can get an average thermal comfort for different set of scenarios so that people can, large set of people can accustom to that.
Okay, okay. Interesting. Thanks so much, Nitya, for this conversation. At least what stands out for me is that heat is not just like, environment, climate issue kind of thing. There's an intersection between the infrastructure that we have, the kind of, urban mobility. And I would say the brunt of it is also in rural areas where there are trees and other things, right? There are extreme climates. So the building designs,
No, that is
uh,
a presumption again. So the presumption is
oh,
typical rural area is expected to have relatively lower temperature than urban areas globally. But the
mm,
studies, what is conducted in Delhi, NCR, and so, based on the
mhm,
outskirts, which are quite dry at the summer period, without much of
mm,
agricultural lands, typically have higher temperature than the core of Delhi. So
yeah,
this scenario in India
correct.
again changes. So nowhere it
Mm, mm,
is, relatively better. Even the rural
mm,
areas in some parts of India are still more challenging than an urban
mm.
area. That's the point. I thought I'll share it. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, no, not at all. So that's what I was extending into how, innovation and cooling technology that's coming forth to be able to think from an perspective of what are the
Yeah,
repercussions of it and how to optimize for it. And of course, for the government to also enforce some strict urban guidelines, maybe, like you said, you see the breach of buildings where one next to the other, absolutely no spacing, right? Everybody is trying to say, every inch of it is something I'll optimize for my home space. So these are things that we should certainly step into correct. And I think just you bringing the geospatial perspective down to the street for us and to listeners is very insightful. Thanks for that, Nitya. And for our listeners, do share it with your network with the summers just around the corner. And thanks for tuning into this All Things Policy
thank you so much.
podcast. Thanks, Nitya.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.